Hi guys, it's Mr. Urgency. I'm out sick today, but you still get to learn. So this is going to be a little video lecture using my PowerPoint as if I was actually in class today. So we're still on concept one, which is basically the unique geography of Africa, both in a physical sense and also in a cultural sense. So again, to remind you guys, we're thinking about what are the conditions that are in place in Africa, in this case culturally, that create a lot of regional differences, not only in Africa but also in the Middle East. So some of the pertinent vocabulary words today are going to be some of our religions that exist in these two areas. In the Middle East and Northern Africa, we mainly have Islam. In Central and Southern Africa, we mainly have Christianity. In between, things get a little bit iffy, okay, which results in conflict. Other words, okay, we're going to talk about the cultural heritages of Africa today. One of the important things is that Africa is more traditional than everywhere else. So it's going to have that traditional economic system, that traditional way of life that's existed for thousands and thousands of years, okay, in a lot of the very rural, isolated areas of the continent. A third vocabulary word today would be westernization. Westernization is basically a form of cultural diffusion where the developed world blends its culture with the undeveloped world. We also have biblical law, that's law based upon Christianity. We have Sharia law, that's law based upon the Quran, which is in Islam. We're also going to talk about eventually, not today though, some of the terrorism that exists in both Africa and the Middle East. So here we go. You guys should be recording these notes right now on your new handout, which is number 5. So the first heritage of African culture would be their traditional way of life. So as I mentioned before, and what we talked about in class is that traditionally people have been, for most of human history, living off of the land. Okay, very old school, conventional methods, things like hunting and gathering. Okay, where mainly the men go out and hunt and provide food for the tribe, while the women and children are gatherers. They go out and gather things like nuts and berries and plants and herbs. Okay, anything they can find, and they're the ones also that provide and produce the food. For nomadic herding, okay, we also call it nomadic pastoralism. These are people that are nomadic, so they're constantly moving around to find their food, also water. And they're herders, so they're doing that with their animals, and their animals provide them with their livelihood. Pastoralist farmers, this is a vocabulary word that describes subsistence farmers, people that stay in one area and just produce what they need. They'll also have some domesticated animals. Another unique thing about the traditional way of life in Africa is their beliefs. So since there's literally thousands of different tribes in Africa, okay, as we see here, each tribe is literally its own unique ethnicity, but also its own language. So there's thousands of languages within Africa. Continuing off of that, this also impacts their beliefs. So the different tribes had different beliefs. Okay, this could mean that they believe in a god, gods. Okay, some of the gods could be animistic. They could have animal characteristics. They can attach some of these animal characteristics to humans. Okay, they believe in the afterlife. Some of them believe in shamans and witches and spells. Some pretty unique stuff. In terms of social organization, it depends on each tribe. Most of them are very, very patriarchal. So the oldest living male is going to dominate and have sway over the village. Some of them, which is very rare today, would be matriarchal. So the oldest living female. We also got to think about how they view marriage. Are the areas polygamous or are they monogamous? Okay, do they have more than one wife or do they only have one wife? The last part would be like the norms, the mores, and the customs and traditions that kind of define each village. So as you guys look at the material today, make sure you guys pay attention to that. Okay, some of the tribes you guys are going to read about today: the Hadza, the Maasai, and the Datoga. Here's a little slide about some of their traditional beliefs when it comes to religion. Most of them still have a belief in some of their more traditional values, especially when it comes to the afterlife and the power of sacred objects, of spells, of curses, of reincarnation, and the power of traditional healers and holistic medicine. Okay, you can see here in this graph, which you guys are going to analyze today, that Tanzania is one such country that has some of these very traditional beliefs, mixed in obviously with Christianity and Islam. Okay. The second heritage would be religion. So the two main religions again in Africa are Islam and Christianity. For Islam, it was brought into northern Africa by Arab traders in the 7th century. This is right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Once the Prophet Muhammad died, the religion of Islam spread like wildfire into the rest of the Middle East, across northern Africa, and even into parts of Europe, especially the Iberian Peninsula, which would be Spain and Portugal. Okay, this brought with it a lot of Arabic culture, so the Arabic language, Arabic architecture, and other religious values that tied into the beliefs of a lot of Middle Eastern dynasties and empires that existed prior to the Prophet Muhammad's death. This includes like ancient Mesopotamia. Here's a map that showcases that spread. Okay, Islam spread again across northern Africa into Europe. It spread up throughout the Middle East, into Turkey and into Eastern Europe. It even spread eastward into what was traditionally called Persia, which would be like present-day Iran, and into Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even India. Here's a unique map which brings up our second type of religion, which would be Christianity. We have Islam in the north, we have Christianity in the south. Both of those religions don't get along too well because they both have the same belief and concept that their religion is the one true faith. And if they both believe that and they are actively seeking converts and followers, that's going to lead to a lot of tension. So we have this middle swath of land here in Africa where we have a lot of religious conflict and ethnic conflict. And for Christianity, this was mainly brought into Africa by European colonization in the 1800s, which we'll talk about during Concept 3. So they brought that in there with their missionary work. The third heritage is an example of cultural diffusion. This is called westernization. So any Western country would be like the developed world, mainly European countries in the United States and other places like Australia. Okay, we have a Western culture. The concept of westernization is when these developed countries and the people from these areas bring their culture with them. This could be things like technology, it could be things like infrastructure, with them to the developing and undeveloped world. And a lot of this, an example would be like the bringing of Christianity into Africa during the age of colonization, in the very same way that Europeans brought Christianity with them to Latin America after 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But this is more than just religion. It deals with anything related to goods and services, plants and animals. Okay, westernization occurred with the Columbian Exchange. Okay, and continued into Africa. Okay, so this is part of that global exchange of goods, of diffusion, of the theme of movement, which resulted in what we see today is a very globalized world. And again, the Columbian Exchange is an example of that. That kind of kick-started it. The age of colonization continued it as Africa was basically partitioned into a variety of zones. And we see it today with globalization and free trade with the arrival of modern technology, especially things like the internet. Okay, so those are the three heritages. You guys are going to do some research on each aspect of it, along with a little character study on a guy named Bakari from Tanzania who exhibits each of these cultural characteristics. So good luck. You guys should have at least half of this assignment done by Tuesday. So that includes the notes, that includes the Bakari analysis, and that also includes at least one of the modules. Have a good Monday.